I'm Sam Gardiner, class of 21. This is Shaan Singh, class of 21. He's a starter on the varsity squash team.
Hi guys, I'm Sean.
So, what have you been up to this quarantine?
Just a lot of college applications, studying, and working out. Don't have a season this term, so trying to make the best of it by working out and staying in shape and being ready for when we get back on campus.
How do you stay in shape for squash?
So for squash, I think the biggest thing is footwork and fitness. So a lot of, running on the treadmills and ghosting. So that's what we've been doing as a squash team. We've been getting on Zoom calls and practicing ghosting together in little small sections everywhere across the world where all our players are. So we've been getting in good work as a team together despite the quarantine.
Can you explain what ghosting is?
So ghosting is pretty much kind of like air guitar, but in terms of air practicing your shots. So you approach in squash. We like to think there's 6 corners. There's the 2 front corners, the 2 middle corners, and the two back corners. So ghosting is where you practice going to all those corners and swinging with your proper swing and proper footwork.
Are you hitting the courts at all? Have you been given like drills and stuff?
Yeah, so I actually am fortunate to have a court not too far from my house, which I have access to during this quarantine time. So every day I've been going to the courts, and luckily the coach, Lawrenceville, Coach Krizak, is an awesome coach, and he's been doing a really good job with the program. And he's been giving all his players drills to do on the court if we are able to get on a court. So that entails, practicing hitting straight shots, winning shots, defensive shots, and it's just it's a good way to keep the hands intact and ready to play at any moment.
So, can you do challenge matches and stuff like outside of Lawrenceville, like competitively, like tournaments and
Yeah, so tournaments have just started to really start up again, and that's also, as I explained earlier, through the U.S. Squash program, and basically they organize tournaments in all places across the country. There's multiple clubs all across the country, and they have a lot of young players as well. And they set up the tournaments, and players sign up and can go and play and compete.
do you plan on competing in any of them?
So I don't know as of right now due to COVID. I have some family members that I currently live with that are high risk. So I'm not sure if I want to take that jump to playing those tournaments. But hopefully, when everything clears up, I'll be able to get back on the court again.
So, do you do any like independent work? Like, is there a particular part of your game that you're trying to work on right now?
So right now, throughout my past 4 years at Lawrenceville, a big struggle of mine has been winning shots and being able to hit a nice drop shot. I've always been a very fast-paced player, and drop shots are really for the well-controlled, timed players. So just getting my timing down and the technique of it has been something that I've been working on. And Coach Krizak has catered a lot of the drills that he has personally sent to me to work on those things. So it's been really helpful, and I've definitely seen an improvement.
Do you have like much communication with the rest of your teammates? Like, do you know how they're doing?
Yeah, so the good thing that I've always loved about the Lawrenceville squash team is that we are a very close knit team, being only a team of 12 on both the girls and the guys team. So we definitely like to keep in touch, and we have a group Snapchat group, and we always are contacting each other in that, wishing each other happy birthdays, giving each other congratulatory message when we see something happen good for one player, and it's a good thing. It's definitely a big reason as to why I came to Lawrenceville in the first place. I always knew squash was going to be a part of my high school journey, and playing for Coach Krizak and with the team at Lawrenceville, full of great players and great kids. It's been an experience that I'm very grateful for.
How would you say you've developed since coming to Lawrenceville? Um,
Under Coach Krizak, I've become a lot more of a leadership type of player. I like to show by example. And, I think I developed into a player who was once very frazzled with who he was going up against to someone who's confident to play anyone. I think that has been a really big step up in my game, gaining that confidence. I feel now I can play at a level that, truly reflects my skill.
Do you have anything to say to kids who would be interested in coming to Lawrenceville for squash?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a competitive program that, is going to push you to be better, but you're going to enjoy the time, um, playing, I think that's where Lawrenceville is where you'd want to come. The competitiveness is high, but we always like to have fun with it. And, being in a sport where it is usually single players, um, having a team is a lot different because you have people who are going to be depending on you and people you can depend on. And with that, you have support to get better. And I think that's one of the greatest things about Lawrenceville squash.
Now, as far as the college process goes and just recruitment, like what are things like with Corona?
So with Corona, a couple of schools, a couple of universities have recently announced that they'll be cutting their programs. So it is a really sad thing to see, especially because squash is a growing sport in America currently in terms of the youth, and I think seeing that being cut out of college sports is a little detrimental to players who have put a lot of hard work into the sport and into playing and learning it and spreading it. So, it's been a tough pill to swallow, but I think we'll have a bounce back and people will realize squash is a very important sport to have in college.
Do you see yourself playing um, after Lawrenceville? Like in what capacity? Like are
Um, So yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, I was not able to get recruited due to Corona. A lot of the schools have been cutting down on recruitment, but I think a lot of the universities that I've been looking at may not have varsity teams, but they do have club teams for me to compete and participate in. And I think wherever I go, I will be playing squash. I think it's become a part of who I am and my identity, and I think I definitely do not want to let that go.
so obviously skill is very important in squash as it is with any other sport. But another very important part of it is the mental game. You know, staying focused, not making any mistakes. Uh, does Where does that come into play for you?
For me, I think mental game is another big thing that I kind of, upgraded in being during my time at Lawrenceville. I think mental game at Lawrenceville, Coach Krizak will teach you, um, it doesn't matter win or loss. You just got to play your game and you got to put your heart on the court. And, whatever, if you do that, you know, you'll be able to change the odds no matter what the numbers on paper look like. And I think that mentality that he instills in all of his players is the reason why we are a pretty successful team almost every year. And
Do you ever find yourself like flubbing a shot or like hitting it into the tin just on a really easy drive?
yeah, I mean that's always gonna happen. You're always gonna give yourself a little hit on the wrist. It's always frustrating to deal with those little mistakes that day in and day out you usually don't mess up. But it's part of the game to make mistakes, and you just got to get through it and keep on playing and keep on focused on your goal of getting that ball away from the player and winning the point.
What situations would you say for you personally do you find the most difficult where the mental component sort of comes into play, like and you may like break down or make mistake?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me when I break down is when a player is as athletic as I am and can keep the point going for a really long time. With squash, it's often like a chess match. You'll have exchanges of defensive plays, but then you'll have a rapid amount of attacking shots that you have to be ready for and on your balls or your feet for. And when that cusp gets to where you can't really push any farther or any harder, that's when the mental game really breaks down, and that's where you make mistakes. And I think that's what happens to me oftentimes. The point gets a little too long, and I get frustrated, and I try to going for a shot that I shouldn't go for, and it ends up failing.
Do you have any sort of like mantras or things you keep in mind in your head as you're playing to keep focus?
So I always just kind of remind myself of the word calm, and just keeping calm is just the biggest thing. Um, in in playing, you gotta just keep your mind sharp and clear of everything that's going on outside of the court and what's inside the court. I think the motto that I use is probably 1 point at a time. Whatever happens, this point happens. It's the next point now. I need to focus on this one, not anything in the past and not anything in the future.
Do you have a strategy you implement, like a certain type of play?
So I think typically what I usually go for in the first game of almost every match is what I like to call a feeling out type of match, where you kind of feel out the strengths of your opponent. And that would just mean I just like to hit deep into the back corners to give my opponent some pressure. And I like to step up on the volleys so that I add even more pressure and see if the other opponent can take that type of pressure and return good shots, tough shots. If not, I know that I can capitalize on winning shots that are more slams rather than finesse shots, which is my expertise, is slam shots versus finesse. So yeah, I think that's my motto. Just get people felt out in that first game, and then use that momentum and take it into the next three.
What types of players do you find yourself playing? Like, is there a like sort of an archetype for like different styles of play, and then which styles of play do you find the hardest to play against?
Mhm. So, as you know, Sam, I'm not the tallest of guys. I'm only around 5'7", 5'8". So, the players that are really, really tall and can reach the ball very well in any corner of the court are the players that I find the toughest to play, just because, they don't really need to be athletic. They just need to be able to read the ball very well to be able to get to a ball in time, because they're so long and their steps are a lot longer. And those guys, they take a lot of space on the court. And as a little guy, I have to go around them to hit the balls. So that's definitely an archetype that I think is hard for me to play. But on the other hand, archetype that I do fare well against are players who are strictly finesse players. I think finesse players, when they get pressured very, very hard, it's hard for them to actually hit the shots they want to hit. And if you can do that to a finesse player, you can pretty much toy with them. And that's what my kind of game style is against those guys.
What are some cool things squash has allowed you to do?
So I think the coolest thing I've ever done was go to Egypt to train for squash. So I'm not sure if you know, Sam, but Egypt is actually one of the best countries in terms of playing squash. And if you look at the professional squash tour, the top 10 players in both men and women are often dominated by Egyptian players. So their training style and their teaching style is a lot better. So having that opportunity to train in Egypt at one of the premier clubs with professionals that are just incredibly good at the game was probably one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. It's a lot different from how the U.S. works in squash. U.S. is more geared to sports like football, basketball, and things like that, whereas squash is one of the main sports in Egypt. And you see there's big clubs, like big gyms like in the US, but geared only for squash. And all the kids in the area come and they play. and the competitive level is just through the roof compared to the U.S. So it was a really fun experience to experience that level of intensity and creativity in the way they play.
So, other than Egypt, are there any other places for tournaments that to you are like stand out as being very competitive and challenging?
So oftentimes the U.S. Open is a very talent filled tournament. And that's often because that is open to not only players in the U.S. but players all across the world. And so you'll get players from France, from Egypt, from Turkey, from Malaysia, and all of these amazing players will come and they'll compete for the U.S. Open title. And I mean that tournament is always one to be very prepared for because no matter who you play in the first round, they're going to be a good player, and you just gotta be your best self. That's about it.
Do you have any like superstitions? Like, do you have any pregame routines?
I think a pregame routine of mine would be I always like to warm up with music, and I always like to get like hyped in the locker room by dancing with my teammates. Just getting hyped to music and getting unloose, getting loose, and just having fun, getting ready to just put it all on the court and just have a smile on my face.
Do you have any advice for people who want to, for people who are going to play at Lawrenceville?
I think my biggest advice would be come ready to work and be ready to be coached because if you're able to let yourself be coached, Rob Krizak, Coach Rob Krizak will make a heck of a player out of you, and you'll enjoy the time that you're playing on the courts. You truly become a family at the Lawrenceville squash team. So if it's like the best place for me, I was a new freshman, so having that team initially already know who I um, was always a good thing to have friendly faces around campus. And I think that's a big thing for the new kids that are coming to Lawrenceville. You'll have that family to immediately look for a helping hand too. So yeah.
What's it like balancing the social life and academics and squash?
So I think balancing social life, squash, and academics is, I think different per person. At Lawrenceville, depending on where you are on the ladder in squash, depending on how you're doing in academics, it really affects how you can perform socially. But I think if you just go into it with the mentality that I'm going to put my 100% in everything that I do, you'll have that time and you'll be able to. It'll come naturally to you to be able to um, adjust all those three things to the perfect percentages for you. And I think for me, I learned academics and squash were the two things that came first, and social life was able to come after I was able to get a hold on those two things at Lawrenceville.
All right, awesome, Sean. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Sam. I had a great time.
Yeah, best of luck to you.
Thank you. You too.